Raiders, welcome back to Sam's Bikes, where you know we only talk e-bikes, and today we are installing a brand new set of EXT ETA version 2s. We have a special guest here, Markus, the suspension whisperer, and we're also going to do a baseline setup on that, and also a baseline setup on my e-Astoria, and also we're going to ask those frequently asked questions, and we're going to get answers from the pro here. So let's get into it. I want to say, riders, that this video is not sponsored by EXT, but they have been helping out the channel a little bit, and so is Markus from Wild Coast Bikes in Barcelona. And riders, if you're watching this in Spain and you want some top-of-the-line suspension, contact Markus, link in the show notes. He's a legend, he'll definitely help you out. Okay, legend riders, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know I can ride a bike okay, but when it comes to mechanical work, pretty rubbish. So we've got Markus here, he's going to be doing all the work. What are we going to do?
We will install this one, the EXT ETA, on your bike. We're going to go through some of the most important things, like cutting the steerer, doing the basic adjustments, and go riding.
Perfect, sounds great. So this is something I haven't done before, and you know, these forks are not cheap. I don't want to mess it up, but Marco was saying that anyone can do it. So we're gonna have a crack at it, and first off, I want to show you the hacks that Marco's come up with, and they're awesome. And this is the first hack that Marco showed me, and I absolutely love this one. When you're taking off your caliper and you've got the adapter and all the spacers, you use an old tube valve nut and screw it on, and all the spacers stay in their place. I love this hack. And the second one, we're using an old monopod here, but you can use pretty much anything, like a thin bit of wood, and this will hold the top of the headset in, and the stem and the spacers. Mate, that is genius. And before we crack on with installing these forks, just wanted to let you riders know that this won't be a really deep dive into suspension. So if you want to have like that baseline setup, we did a video with Nico, the Aussie punter, getting his rein into that base setup. And also, when I was building up my dream build, both these will be in the show notes, I go really deep into spacers, into the size of the shocks, to the coil, to everything you need to know about buying that suspension. So those two videos will help. But if you do want to install those forks, this one is definitely the video to watch. And so riders, before we crack on, you'd remember when I was building out the dream build, I did have some version 2 ETAs on there. They were Markus's, and they were like test forks, and they were cut a little bit short for my liking on this bike, because the stack height was quite low. So today we're changing that over, and we're going to show you how to not cut it super short, because you can always cut it shorter later on. And I think it's important, especially on a new bike, to be able to play around with that stack height. Okay riders, Markus said this is easy. So mate, show us the tools we need to get this done.
Yeah. So we need a pipe cutter or a hacksaw. I prefer the pipe cutter.
Yep.
You need a file.
What type of file is that? A metal file?
Yeah, sorry.
But a soft metal file,
yeah.
not a coarse one. Yep, so just a basic metal, yep.
Yeah, we want to use a tape measure.
Yep.
A mallet. A torque wrench. Then some basic tools. And of course grease.
Yep. And what's your favorite grease?
I like this blue nautical grease.
Yep.
Because it holds up very well in water. And
okay, and perfect. Just let me cut in there, riders. We're going to have a list of all the tools we're using in the show notes, so check that out. So now we're going to do a dry run, which means we're going to install the headset without any grease at the bottom, how it goes. And riders, a pro tip or a Sam's tip would be, if you are pulling apart a headset and you don't know how it goes back together, before you like pull everything apart, take some photos of it as you're pulling it apart. It's easier to put it back together. And we're going to do that dry run so we can work out the length of the steerer to cut.
exactly.
Correct? All right, let's do that.
The thing is, as long as you have more of a distance here than what you would expect, it means that the tube is longer.
Yeah, so it's fine.
So we're not overly worried
Yeah.
about it. The issue is, of course, if you forget to install this and you push it up and you mark and you cut, it's cut too short.
Yeah.
You need to make sure before that you have the correct set of bearings installed. for the fork and for the bike.
Yep. So you see the dry run is done, and you want to make sure 100% you've got all the bearings in, all the spaces in its place. And I've got 3 spaces at the bottom, 2 at the top here. And the reason I've done that, it's a new bike, I want to play around with the stack height, and also I will be taking these forks to other bikes. So I want to make sure I can run them on different bikes. And also, if you do want to cut it shorter, you can. You cannot add to the steerer length, but you definitely can take it away. So now we're going to do is we're going to take a marking here, and you were saying when we cut it, we have to cut it a little bit under it so it pulls tension. Is that correct?
Yeah, because the tube has to be shorter than the tallest spacer.
Yep. And how much by?
A few millimeters.
3?
Give or take.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously, and I've never thought about it, but it does make sense, 2 or 3 millimeter space, because if not, you're going to have metal on metal and it's not going to pull it together, correct?
Exactly.
All right, so now we're going to cut the steerer with the pipe cutter.
So we're going to mark first a line for reference, okay?
Yep.
And then what we can do also, if you help me out and hold the fork.
Yep.
Sometimes this line can be a little bit difficult to see. So just take a tape measure, get an idea of how long your stereo tube should be after it's cut.
Okay. What do they say? Measure twice, cut once?
That's it, isn't it?
That's what they say.
Your stereo length will be pretty much 20 centimeters long.
Okay, I just thought of another thing, and let me ask you if you think it's good. Obviously, if it's you're not building up a bike and you're changing the forks, would it be an idea to maybe just measure your old steerer and just cut straight off that, if you're happy with that?
Perhaps not cut straight off, but at least take that measure and use that as a reference.
Yeah.
Because maybe we're going a little bit deeper, but maybe if you're changing brands of your fork, your ride height might be a little bit different. The axle to crown measurement might be different.
Yep.
So you might want to change your stack height.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But you definitely use the old fork for a reference, because most likely your fork is not going to be cut shorter.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, so we'll do one last measurement, just to make sure we are at 20 centimeters.
Yep.
Just above.
Yep, perfect.
All right.
And I just want to say to the riders, Marco was just saying, make sure you take off all the bearings. I think it's important, because you're going to get small metal flakes when you're cutting the steerer. You definitely don't want that in your expensive headset.
So we get a bit of a sharp edge here after the cutting. That's why we need the file.
Yep.
It's good to hold the fork this way so that your filings go away from the fork.
Yeah.
So they do not end up in here.
Good tip. So now we're going to install the star nut and take it away.
So with a good tool, it's super easy. You take a star nut, screw it on there, screw it on.
And that goes there like that.
It goes like that. Take your mallet.
Yep. Now, I'm going to say there is a ghetto hack. You can do that with the screw and with a mallet and a bit of wood.
Yeah.
I've done it back in the BMX days. It's not a good idea because it just twists a little bit.
I think there is a saying, just because you could doesn't mean you should. Just get this tool.
Yeah, I'd say it's like, you got the Park Tool one, which is probably like 40 bucks, 40 euros. And I've got the budget one, which does a great job. And I think it was like 15.
Yeah. They're all good. Put some grease on here, spread that out, put the crown race. I really love these that are split.
Yeah.
So you just slide it on, you don't need that big tool.
Yeah. That's another thing that we used to have to do in the BMX days. They never had split ones. You had to bang it on with the special, it's like a pole that's just a little bit wider and you have to smash it down. So annoying.
Yeah. Have you ever had to remove those?
Yeah. Almost impossible. You need a very thin, strong screwdriver.
Yeah.
You can't get it out.
Or a tool, which will make it easier. We put enough grease, but not too much grease.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's better, I think, personally, to do a little bit more maintenance than trying to put too much grease and get away from maintenance.
Okay. Yeah.
Once you've taken the fork on and off a couple of times, it's super easy. Take it off, clean it off.
Yeah, it's not hard.
Put it back on.
Yeah, it's not hard.
All right. So then, now we are actually at the stage where we're going to permanently fit the fork.
So now we're going to permanently put the fork on. Little recap. So you've greased everything, not too much, but enough. And now it's all in its order and you're about to put it back on. So let's do that.
We're gonna need the top cap.
Yep.
A tool. The thing is now it looks like the fork is installed, but the steerer is loose, right?
Yep.
So you have to remember, because we're not going to tighten this until we are on wheels.
Yep. Because that will use gravity to compress it all.
We're gonna be able to put the correct preload on the bearings.
Yep.
And also to put the handlebar straight.
Yep.
Which I'm sure you've had bikes with a handlebar in all kinds of.
It's actually like when I go out and do this, like I have done this a few times. I'm not the best mechanic, but I do it. I do exactly the same. I'll put it on the ground, I'll get it there, and then I'll put it on the ground, I'll tighten everything up and I'll get it close to straight. But I find after the first ride, it loosens off just a little bit. There's a little bit of give, and then I have to tighten it up again.
Yeah. Now we're gonna route the brake hose.
Yep. So another recap, forks are on, calipers are on, we're about to install the front wheel. And I had a question, is it worth really putting a lot of grease on that axle? Because I put my bikes in my camper van a lot and I always take the front wheel off and I hate getting grease. But is it worth it? What's your thoughts on that?
I think you should have a little bit of grease on the surfaces which are in contact with either the bearings directly or some kind of sleeve adapter between the bearing and the axle, just to not have a metal to metal contact there.
Yep.
I like to trade off. I like to put a bit less grease and do more maintenance.
Yep.
And as you say, you take off the wheel really frequently. So
I don't want a lot of grease on it. Just a little bit. Just so it's not friction. Just so there's like, just helping take that friction away.
yeah, exactly.
All right, so front wheel's going on.
So we put just a little bit, and also on this surface, because this is actually a floating axle.
Oh, really?
So when you tighten it, it doesn't clamp the lower legs. You see this on a lot of forks, especially high-end forks now. It's a better system.
Okay.
Basically.
The whisperer here. If he says it, he says it.
There is something called friction, which in a sense we like friction, but in this sense we really dislike friction. We want the lower legs absolutely parallel with the, what do you call these? The uppers?
The stanchions.
Yeah.
The stanchions. That makes sense, because if we're moving from left to right and the legs are moving, it means they're not going to be in a line like a piston. So they're going to have lateral flex, which will then not make it run smooth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very interesting stuff.
There is a number stamped like on a lot of screws on mountain bikes, which says a torque value.
Yep.
Please follow the torque value. It doesn't, like I said, you're not clamping the hub with this through bolt.
Yeah.
So you don't have to torque it over torque it. You don't have to, you're not doing anything better by torquing that one more.
I would say I've never used a torque wrench on my forks.
Yeah.
I always just do it by hand, but that's good to know because I mean, I always use a torque wrench on my handlebars.
Yeah.
And always on the seat, but never there because I never thought of that. I just thought, okay, hand tight so it doesn't fall off. Very interesting.
Yeah. Most people in most situations, like you said, you take the wheel on and off all the time, putting it in the car. I think the manufacturers expect that you do not all the time use torque wrench.
Yeah.
If you have a flat tire in the middle of the trail,
Yeah.
you're not going to pull out the torque wrench most likely. So,
It's interesting though.
but don't torque it down. Don't be crazy because you're not clamping anything with this one.
Yeah.
We put this one to the torque value.
Yep.
That's
I'd imagine like 6.
it says on this little sheet
Okay.
that we're going to talk about. I tend to like to not memorize torque values because it's easy to get them mixed up, or you forget, or you are you used to working with inch pounds?
No.
Perhaps.
No.
This one is labeled in Newton meters and inch pounds.
Okay.
So, for instance, you can make a mistake there.
Yeah.
We're going to tighten down the pinch bolt. The sheet, which we're going to look a little bit more at, it has, of course, the torque value. So we set the torque wrench, and then to make sure that we get the good alignment with the lowers and the stanchions, the uppers.
Yep.
Push down and up on the fork a couple of times. Okay.
So what I didn't mention, riders, is we're going to get to it next, but there's like a cheat sheet in all your EXT. You want to keep it. And it's really interesting what you've just done there because I had no idea you had to do that. Like it does make a lot of sense to me. Like now seeing it, like of course you want your lowers completely in line with your stanchions.
Yeah.
So like when it's like a piston, when it's going up, if it's a little bit crooked, it's just not going to run as plush.
That's it.
Very, very, see, you're learning something every day, riders.
So, okay, let's just go through what we have done and not done.
Yep.
We have tightened the axle, we have tightened the pinch bolt, we have tightened the brake caliper.
Yep.
We have tightened this little guy.
Yep.
We have installed the fork, we have tightened the stem, and we have put preload before tightening the stem.
Yep.
We have put preload on the bearings. So from this point, this is completely installed.
Okay. So we're going to go back in the bike stand.
Yeah.
And now we're going to do our baseline setup on the suspension.
Yeah.
Okay, another recap. We are fully installed with those forks. Everything's tightened up. Everything's torqued to the correct torque. And now we have the instructions or user manual, one sheet of paper. We're going to go ahead and set up the front and back to that base setting. So first off, we're going to start on the EXT, and you're going to talk me through doing it.
Yeah.
Because I like to do it and then I'll remember it. So what do we do? First up.
So just quickly, each EXT product comes with a short manual in the box, and the full manual is available online on extremeshocks.com. And here you can find how to operate the different levers and screws and whatnot, and what they do.
It's definitely more complicated suspension, I think. Yeah. Well, saying that, not really, because it's what you're used to. Like I have on a lot of my bikes is the X2 and the 38s, and I'm used to setting up that. But when I first looked at it for the first time, I wasn't used to it. Yeah. So let's get used to it. All right. So where do we go first?
So first, we're going to set the coil preload.
Yeah.
And on the Historia, you have to set the coil preload with the bike lifted up off the ground, with the rear wheel off the ground. So
for the unexperienced rider out there, including myself, I didn't know what preload was, but let's show the riders. So basically, if I'm not wrong,
all right.
Okay, so the preload for me that I didn't know is this. So at the moment, you'll see the suspension is a little bit loose here. So, and also this coil is loose. So we need to add preload. So
Yeah.
how do we do that?
So the E-Storia has a top-out spring, which means that you have to weigh the top-out spring with the weight of the rear wheel and the rear triangle and all that unsprung weight. So,
Off the ground.
yeah, so the way it is right now, it's perfect. Now, what you do is turn down, tighten up the preload collar just until you touch, and then you can tighten until you can operate a little grub screw.
Yep, I can operate it now.
So then you can tighten down the grub screw in a groove.
There's a little bit of movement there though.
Let me see.
Is that going to be?
Yeah, you can tighten it.
So just touched.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll go another half turn.
Or less.
Okay.
Maybe 1 or 2 grooves if you can.
No, can't operate. Yeah, I can operate it there now.
Okay,
So, okay, and that feels kind of tight.
that's perfect.
Okay, so we're going to tighten up. On the other side, riders, there's a screw here on this side, and you have to tighten it up. It's a plastic screw, so don't over torque it, and it's not holding any weight. It's just making it not slip.
Yeah,
So you put nothing on it, like
yeah, just
1
tighten.
Newton meter, like nothing, just a little turn.
Yeah.
Okay, next up.
Next up, we have the compressions, and on the E-Storia you have the hydraulic bottom out as well. So you have 3 different settings. What we can do is first we take the hydraulic bottom out, we close it up completely, and then back it off to the first detent or the first click.
Can you explain to the riders and to me what hydraulic bottom out is? And we have 1 minute.
Hydraulic bottom out removes the rubber bottom out bumper.
Yep.
And replaces it with a hydraulic system which you can completely control with this regulator, with this adjuster.
Yep.
That's what it is.
And I'm going to say, I don't really know what it does, and I don't know how to explain it, but I know what I felt, and it feels that you've got no bottom of the bike. When you bottom out, it gives that last pinch of the bottom out where you feel like your body's going to get slammed, but you don't get slammed. It just softens you. It's quite amazing. That is what sold me on this shock, definitely. So how do we set it?
So we close it up. All adjusters on all suspensions that I'm aware of work just like the water tap in your home. Your home. So you close it clockwise and you open it counterclockwise.
Okay, so fully closed clockwise and open anti-clockwise. All right, so let's do that.
When you are closing it, try to feel the clicks. Try to feel that you have,
Yeah,
so that you know how the clicks feel, okay?
Yeah. Okay, so that is fully closed.
Yeah.
We want to turn it back 1, correct?
You want to turn it back until you are in a detent.
Yep.
Okay.
I felt a 1 click there. And I do notice those clicks they're bigger. They're like almost like a quarter turn.
Yeah.
So interesting. All right, so that's done.
Now take the tool back because we're going to open it completely.
Okay.
And when you open it, you count the amount of clicks that you have available. So I start here with 0.
7.
Okay. And then you go back to the click. You're not fully forced open, but you are in the click.
Okay, so you go back. Okay. Yep, I've done that.
Okay.
So to recap that again, so we've fully closed it, and then we've fully opened it, and then we've gone back till we can feel the first click.
Yeah. I always prefer to stay in a click. I don't like when you have an adjuster fully forced open or fully forced closed. Usually that's not good.
Okay. All right.
Then we go on to the low speed compression.
Yep.
Sorry, we can take the high speed if you want.
Okay, so this is the high speed compression. We're going to fully open it.
Fully close it first.
Fully close it first. Okay, fully closed. And now?
And then you go to the first click. And there you have your 0.
Okay, yep.
And then you start counting.
1. 16.
Okay, perfect. So are you in a detent? Are you inside of a click?
No, I'm right at the end, so I'll go back. Yep.
Okay, perfect. And then we do the same thing with the low speed compression.
Okay.
So we have 7, 16,
Yeah.
14. Now we know the range
Yep.
of adjustment.
Yep.
Okay. So now we can have a baseline
Yep.
and we know the range.
So
So we
is that
need
what-
to do the rebound as well.
Okay. So we go all the way to closed. Now, the back, that's into a 10th. Okay, we go 1.
So now we have 7, 16, 14,
Okay. Yep.
15. Okay. We have all the adjusters open.
Yep.
We have minimum preload.
Yep.
You have everything as soft and fast as possible.
Yep.
This is how I like to start adjusting a suspension.
Okay.
You're fully open, and the reason is because most riders are happy to add support. In general, it's more difficult to identify harshness and reducing harshness by opening the adjusters or removing preload.
Yep.
So I prefer a rider to come from the open end and wanting to firm things up.
Now, one thing that I don't understand is if we're fully open on the compression, I get that. If we're fully open on the rebound, is that fast or slow?
That's fast.
That's fast. Okay, so the first point of call for me as a rider would be if it's fully open, to go over a jump or a reasonably fast rock garden and see if it's pogoing me. That's where I'd first, and then I'd start slowing it down.
Yeah.
Maybe if it's pogoing me a lot, 2 or 3 clicks,
Yeah.
go and ride the same thing again. I always go to rebounds first of all. That's what I would do, but how would you recommend someone start to test that?
First of all, you need to get your sag, dynamic sag or ride height.
Active sag.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's very difficult to measure.
An active sag is, for the riders, I think I understand. Active sag is the range that you sit in at the most of the time in your ride.
Yeah. Basically, you want your active sag in a place where you have enough up travel and down travel on the bike, so that the wheel can track both up and down.
Yeah, and that's what, like when you see the downhill racers having the big systems, the whatever it's called, that's what they'll be looking at the most, where the active sag is.
Well, that's one of the parameters.
Yeah. Suspension experts here, not so sure.
We use a lot of parameters in suspension. Everything affects the behavior of suspension.
Now, I think what we've done there is pretty straightforward on the forks.
Yep.
I think, so we have our user manual. So the one thing we want to know in these forks is we've got 2 air chambers.
You can set up the adjusters on the damper, and that will connect the shock pump.
Okay, so the E-story is set. Now we're going over to the front. We've done exactly the same. So everything's open and then just clicked back to being inside a click. You don't want to be all the way.
Yeah.
So we've gone back. And now we're going to go in to put the air in.
Yeah.
And normally we would go and test sag, but we're going to go off the air pressures, the EXT, and I weigh 83 kilos on a good day. So again, riders, we've got 2 air chambers. So we're going to go 100 in the plus, and we're going to go 65 in the plus.
Yeah. So we said 100. You don't have to just quickly disconnect it as fast as you can. You can just wait a few seconds and see that the value is stable, that it's not dropping.
And that reminds me of a big question, and you answered it before, and I think it's really important, riders. So we connect our shock pump to our shocks and we instantly think we've lost pressure, but actually the air is going into the pump. And also when you disconnect it, I always think, like, sometimes you hear tsh or a tsh, and you're like, oh, I lost more air, and I recheck it again. But you were saying that that's actually the air in the pump and the hose, not the disconnection from the chamber.
Yeah. If you think that you're losing pressure disconnecting your pump, you should get another pump.
Yeah.
Because the CL is not supposed to release until the valve is closed. You hear that?
Yeah, but
that's the pressure in the pump.
Yeah, but this is dropping the pin. That's dropping the pin first.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at that pump.
So it's a little plunger that opens the.
That's a way better system.
The valve.
That's a way better system, because you know for sure that when you undo the secondary, the chamber's already closed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we have the plus field.
Yep.
The super plus, and now when we fill the positive, this is actually also good to do with the bike up, because the positive and the negative on the ERA is open when the fork is fully extended.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a problem that you don't think that the positive and negative are properly balanced,
that's interesting.
You need to extend it completely.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when the bike's, and I've never thought about that either, when the bike's on the ground, gravity's working against it, and we are going into our travel.
Yeah.
So yeah, learning a lot here today.
With suspensions, you need to take your time setting them up.
Yeah.
And you will have a good payoff.
But it's it's one of my king hates, and you go out to the mountain bike park, or you go see people riding on $10,000 bikes, and I can clearly see that their suspension isn't set. Just by seeing them riding, they're sitting way too much into their sag. I'm like, dude, when did you check your suspension last? Because it's wrong. It's so wrong. In where we were in Italy, in Finale Lura, and there was a young guy riding, and I actually reset all the suspension out on the trail.
Yeah.
He didn't know it. Like, I helped him. I said, dude, we need to set this back up.
Yeah, it's fun when you can help people as well.
Yeah, totally.
So we've reached the target value.
So now we're at 65.
And then again, we're working with the air chamber here. We don't need to rush to disconnect it. We can take our time just to see that the pressure doesn't drop, to see that it's equalizing properly.
Yep.
Cover is beautiful though, isn't it?
Sure.
It's machined out of aluminium.
It is beautiful. Wouldn't want to lose that. So now the air's all set, and we've completely opened up the suspension under compression. But we're going to do it a little bit different to the back, because suspension at the back, as you were saying, was harder to get a baseline on because every suspension system's different.
Yeah.
But on the forks, we can get more of a baseline. So we're going to go off the instruction manuals.
Yeah.
And they say high-speed compression.
7.
7, hang on.
So this is all from closed.
All from closed. So remember, riders, like a tap. High-speed compression, what are we doing? 7.
7.
But from the first click. Okay, low speed?
7 as well.
That's 4.
And the rebound you want to put to 12.
So now the suspension's fully set. We should have a pretty good baseline on the front, and on the back, what I would do, what I'm gonna do, is I'm gonna go with rebound first, and then compression, and then hydraulic bottom out. That's the order I would probably do it in. And I've found this really interesting, so thank you, and riders, I hope you found it interesting too. So let's do a little bit of frequently asked questions that I have. Now, first up, I weigh 183 kilos on a good day. After Christmas, maybe not. What coil, so where should we go with coil? Like, I think I've got a 500 on here, or a 475. I think I put a 475 on there. No, I've got a 500 on there. Yeah. So where should I be going with that coil? Should I be a 400, a 600, or a 500? How do we know?
So most suspension manufacturers have some sort of calculator on their websites, on their respective website. Extreme Shocks has one. Many bike frame or bicycle brands have also recommended coil rates listed on their website for specific frames.
So should we be going off the suspension website or the bike manufacturers for the rear?
If the frame manufacturer recommends a spring rate, that has been tested with that bike taken into consideration. So that spring rate is probably good.
And come down to my next question. With air, so we have an O-ring with air, and that shows me, first of all, my sag. It also shows me my bottom out. Now, how do I know, and with the hydraulic bottom out, it's very difficult to know you're bottoming it out. So how do I know that I'm bottoming out that shock? Can I use this, like I always wondered, could I use that as an indicator? Or what's this little thing do?
Well, that's a bumper. So that's when you bottom out, you go onto that bumper.
Okay. But can I use that as an indicator?
Not really. It's not.
I have been.
I mean, you can, but the problem with this bumper, your goal with your setup of the bike should be to use 100% of your suspension.
Yep.
So if you go down a trail and you find this one pushed all the way up there,
yep,
it doesn't really tell you much. If it's an O-ring or if it's this bumper, it doesn't really tell you much. It tells you that you have been using the full range of the suspension, but it doesn't tell you how much you have been in that zone.
Yeah.
If you've been there several times, only once. For instance, maybe you have a series of jumps or rocks, a rock garden that becomes more and more difficult, demanding for the suspension. So as you progress, you use up more and more of your suspension through that rock garden. But what you don't know is at what point you did bottom out.
Yeah.
So using an O-ring or something like that, it can be a help, but it's not very reliable.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about high-end suspension.
Yeah.
It's not a very reliable way of saying that am I getting the best performance out of my suspension or not? I personally prefer to use the stopwatch. The stopwatch is great because it doesn't have good days or bad days.
Yeah.
It doesn't make up its own mind.
Do you mean timing yourself on a downhill?
Yeah. So you can time yourself on a downhill or on an uphill with e-bikes, and from there see what is making you feel better on the bike.
Yeah.
Because in the end, what we want is confidence on the bike.
Yeah.
We want you to be able to keep your front rear center gravity over the right point on the bike.
Yeah.
And by making adjustments on the suspensions or of the suspensions, we can come to that point where confidence is increasing, and when confidence is increasing, you brake less and you go faster.
Yeah.
So just by looking at a single parameter like a bottom out, it's not a very reliable way of making sure that your suspension is well set up.
But for me, in probably a very ghetto way of setting up my suspension, especially with air and without hydraulic bottom out, it's one indicator that I use. It's like, boom. It's like, okay, I better put some more air in, or a token or something. But you don't get that, so you don't really know where you're at. It almost feels like cheating because out of the box, it felt good. Like I was like, oh, I've got to do something. No, it felt good. Like, so let's say on the ETA, on the version 2, so we've got 2 air chambers there, and we've set that to a nice baseline that EXT are recommending for my weight. Now, if I go down and I feel a harsh bottom out off a jump that I normally do, so I will always say ride where you normally ride, and I do like to jump. So if I do harshly bottom out, where should I be adding more air? Should I be adding it into the plus or the double plus?
That is always super difficult to decide, because it depends how you feel the suspension over the full range.
Yeah.
If you feel the suspension good on your normal riding and your only problem is that you're bottoming out, one solution may be to add more air in the plus plus
Okay.
to prevent the bottoming out. Another way would be to go for the damper.
Compression. Add compression.
Add compression.
Yep.
Or remove rebound.
Remove rebound.
So we open the rebound more.
Yep.
It depends a bit on the situation that you find yourself in. If you feel that you bottom out, let's say you hit the square edge.
Yep.
And you feel that you're bottoming out, this could be a spring setting, but it could also be that your dynamic ride height is a bit low, and you could increase your dynamic ride height by adjusting the damper, and you could increase the compression damping, or you could reduce the rebound damping to increase the dynamic ride height. So the answer is put some more pressure in the plus plus and you're done.
Yeah.
It could be, but I don't think that's a very fun answer.
A dirty trick that I use, I was out testing the All Bear Wild the other day, and I had, stupidly I didn't take a shock pump with me. I only had 2 hours, and my first downhill I bottomed out harsh on a jump, and I just cranked up compression.
Yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't right. It didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel plush, but it fixed. So it fixed my problem for that moment. But I would have gone for air or a token.
It fixed one problem, but it introduced another.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's like that. We need to compromise because no suspension can be best set up for every situation.
That's why you see at the World Cup, the guys are testing for hours and hours and hours to get the right setup.
Yeah.
And kind of like I'm kind of a set and forget type of guy. Like I heard Jared Graves talk about it years ago. Jared Graves is a famous BMX mountain biker, cross-country rider from Australia. And he said, better the devil you know. So like, better the devil you know means like, once you have your setup, you know what your bike's going to do in that situation, which will give you confidence to push into a situation. If you go in and you're changing your bike all the time, you don't know what it's going to do. Yeah. So then you don't know how to react. So I'm more like that. I prefer to know what my bike's going to do and let my body react.
Yeah.
Because we forget we have all these things that are suspension.
I think that's a very sound approach to invest the time into getting a good base setup of your suspension. Perhaps even do that with a suspension tuner who will work with you for the time needed to find the correct setup for you on the bike. And then you have your baseline setup, and then you can start playing with tire pressures or stack height or going to the gym or whatever you want to improve even more the suspension. But each of these things affect the other. If you reduce pressure in the front wheel, you will no longer feel exactly the same from the fork because your force input is different. So it depends on what level, what detail you want to adjust your suspension. But the more time you invest in setting it up, the better it will be set up.
Yeah, for sure. And what do you think about things like, so you said use an expert. I mean, not everyone has that ability to pay for that. What about like ShockWiz or the thing from RockShox or SRAM? I think they make like, it's called ShockWiz maybe?
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Have you ever used it? To be honest, I haven't used them.
No.
I have seen some friends using them and they seem to be getting a result from it. Whether that result is actually a confidence-inspiring solution by a well-known brand, which makes you think that your bike is well set up and therefore you ride your bike better. Or if the suggested settings actually makes a difference to your riding. I don't know, but it's really interesting stuff, the data capture.
Oh, definitely. I think it's for me and my setup and how I'm riding a lot of bikes now, and it is I don't like doing setup. Like it's cool as a bike tester to do it the first 5 bikes, but now I'm like, you know, on to like every week I'm testing something, and it takes time. And also, like, for me, it's like, so this is how I go now, and whether it's right or wrong, it's my way of doing it. I go sag, 30% on the back, 20% at the front, and I will zero everything out. So if we imagine we have 20 clickers on rebound, 20 clickers on compression, I will go 0. So I'll go 10 in the middle. And I will then ride the bike for the day, and first thing I'll go into is rebound.
Yeah.
And rebound is because of my safety, and I like to jump, so I'll run my rebound slow. I'm not a racer, I like slow rebound. And then compression for me is just more comfort. So if I feel the bike's uncomfortable, I'll start winding compression off.
Yeah.
If I feel like I'm losing a lot of pedal stroke and it's not active enough, I'll add some compression. But that's kind of but that's years and lots of testing and kind of knowing what the bike's doing as well. Like, I think people that don't have a lot of experience on bike setup, it's very hard for them to really know even where to go.
I think you're nailing it actually there, because what you need is a baseline. What you need is a reference. And your baseline is to set it up like this and start from there.
Yeah.
You know what you want to adjust when you feel a certain thing from the bike.
Yeah.
So that works for you, and that is great. Perhaps the biggest takeaway for me from setting up suspensions is that you need to have baselines.
Yeah.
Like for instance, if you want to set up your suspensions for jumping,
It's totally different.
you need to have a jump, and you need to do that jump 100,000 times.
Yeah.
With your suspension in the same way, with the same conditions, to know when that suspension is correctly set up so that you can pop off that lip with the most force to reach a bigger jump. And to do that, you need to eliminate as many parameters as possible. So for instance, if you have your favorite jump and you come in and you have to pedal or you have to brake to do that jump is garbage for setting up your suspension, because every time you brake a little bit different, or every time you pedal a little bit stronger.
Yeah.
So you need something where you can eliminate as many parameters as possible.
I'll give you a real world example. A year ago, pretty much a year ago, I went with a friend, Ben Moore. Send this to you, Ben, hate you. He said come to a race in Poland, and it was super easy. And the first thing I arrived, and I took my Kaniva SL, which is a big super enduro bike, and all set up for downhill riding, not racing, riding. So pretty soft, not progressive, the first jump at the track was 13 meters.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no other jumps on the track to test my suspension on. And Ben was like, got out the shock pump, and he was like changing his settings, and you know, he's a professional racer, by the way. You know, so he knew more what to do. And he was like, no, you got to put more pressure. And I was like, nah, I'm not changing anything on my bike, because more pressure, more air pressure means faster rebound. And on a 13-meter jump, I don't want to go over the handlebars. I don't want to get ejected off it. I ended up jumping it pretty awfully. I did it 4 times very badly. but I didn't crash because I knew what my bike was going to do. Had I had a smaller jump or a tabletop or something to practice on to get my suspension tuned, then I would have done that. But I had no time. Like, we were there for practice, and like, I didn't want to die, so I just took the Jared Graves way. Better the devil you know. And I was lucky not to die that day. But yeah, I think it definitely does take a lot of time. And what I, want people to get from this podcast interview thingamajig is, how long does it take you to earn 10,000 euros? How many hours of work have you spent to buy this bike? Spend some time setting it up, and don't do it with your friends. Don't go out riding and go, oh, I've got to give me a second, let me change my... No, people hate that. You want to go out on your own and test. Or with one guy and say, we're going to go test today, because it's not fun. Testing's not fun. It takes time. Or
invest a little bit of money into a suspension tuner. Go there. And
do you do suspension tuning?
I do a little.
Yeah. So who would do it in Spain? I don't know anyone that gets suspension tuning here.
It's not very much built up. I would say I'm working on collecting, because in the end what you need is a big load of data behind you to be able to not waste time, but invest the time wisely for the customer or for the person, so that he gets a good suspension setup in as short amount of time as possible. But I think it's not that big developed market for it. But we're talking about bikes here for like 10,000 euros
and more.
We're talking the suspension kit that you have just mounted. It costs 3,000 euro.
I know.
It deserves to have a little bit
of love. I agree.
I think so. I think you can get so much more out of the suspension if you invest a little bit more.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think it's something we were talking about before is you think it's, a lot of people think it's black magic and only a few people in the world know how to set suspension. But no, I used to think that, but I'm definitely now, I'm not an expert, but I definitely know how to get what I want out of suspension. But in the back of your mind, everyone's human. Like, everyone, thinks, am I doing it right? I don't know if that's right, but it's right for me.
Yeah, exactly. I'd just like to add one thing, that usually if you buy a suspension, if you buy a high-end suspension like this, if you buy it from us, for instance, we go for a ride with you. We can spend the whole day or a weekend with you, because our goal is that you mount the suspension on your bike and you leave with it set up, so that you have a good experience.
I know. It's crazy how many, I mean, I'm just talking from what I've seen out in the trails, how many high-end electric mountain bikes are sent out of the bike shops, not set up. Like, that should be a part of the purchase. Like, I know that, we did it in Adelaide at Wheel Rides, and they spend like an hour setting up suspension with every customer. But like, that doesn't happen in most shops. Most people selling the bikes don't even really know how to do it.
Yeah, I love to go riding, so any chance I get to go riding, I take it.
All right, well, I reckon we should finish up there. Thank you so much. Really a pleasure. And riders, if you have any questions on this setup, link in the show notes. I will send them over to Markus, and we are done. You know it, riders. If you've liked this video, subscribe, like, comment on this video. It really does help out, and we're going to see you soon.